Greetings from Hong Kong. My name is Anatoly Oleksienko. I'm professor of international higher education at the Center for Higher Education Leadership and Policy Studies. Together with the Consortium of Higher Education Researchers in Europe, we organize webinars in global higher education. And today I have great pleasure to welcome my colleague from Haifa, Professor Miri Yemini. Uh, Miri was born and raised in Ukraine, and we just kind of spoke briefly that the two of her countries are currently in this critical condition, right? Just being in the state of war. And Miri uh, moved to Israel and made her Masters of Science and PhD in biotechnology at Tel Aviv University. And then she continued with postdoc in materials engineering. And at some point, she decided that that's not her area and she moved to education. That's amazing kind of move, although logical given that education is such an interdisciplinary field. So Miri had a successful career with getting a lot of support grants from different research agencies, including Jean Monnet module grant from the European Commission for teaching and research on internationalization education. And then she's also served as a co-chair for UNESCO on technology and internationalization in education. Just recently, she moved to Technion, the Israeli Institute of Technology, where she is professor of education. And as far as I understand, Miri also has a new grant on youth and responsibilities, youth activism and responsibilities in climate change, human rights, but also focusing on educational field, on global dimensions of education. So Miri will tell us more about what it means to be a successful academic in the Israeli system of knowledge development. And I look forward to learn more about Israel myself. My compatriots left Ukraine at some point after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But then, to be honest, I knew little about what was going on in the new place where they kind of began to develop their careers or continue with research and teaching and so on. So, Miri, without further ado, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar. And as we agreed, you will speak for 30 minutes, so then everyone will have a chance to ask you a question, make comments. All participants are most welcome to use the chat for these purposes, so that I can also invite you to speak, or if you prefer to leave your comment instead of speaking, just do that. And we will engage in this conversation after Miri's presentation. So Miri, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Anatoly. Hello, all. It's great being here. Thank you for this invitation. So my talk today is concerning external funding in a system that prioritizes this type of investment in higher education. And actually, I would like to start with a mystery. That's how me and my PhD student, Yaniv, came into this topic. I work on, as Anatoly mentioned, I work on issues of internationalization, including in higher education. But until this project, I looked more into the micro level type of phenomena. So here you can see an extract from a report by the European Union looking into the success in research. So the x-axis would be countries, and the y-axis would be Research Excellence Index, and I will explain you in a second how it has been calculated. You can see here that Israel is number 6, scored quite high in this index. And it basically raises a question concerning Israel's location in this index, and perhaps what is the composition of the index, how Israel got to be relatively successful in it, and all kinds of questions related to the education system. So we started with this chart. And then when I want to look into the details of this number that you saw of this ranking, apparently this index is composed of 4 parts, and each of them calculated differently. So it's about external funding, a very particular and prestigious type of external funding, which is the funding by the European Research Council. European Research Council, for colleagues who are outside Europe, which is probably the majority of you, is an extremely, extremely prestigious grant, individual grant that is applied by a bottom-up, meaning scholars can suggest their own topics. It is evaluated by a scientific panel sent out for external review and includes interviews as well. So this is the first basically part of the index, and you can see here on in this column that it is calculated here per expansion of investment in R&D of the country. And you can see that Israel scores extremely high. It scores twice more than the next country in line, which is Switzerland. The second part is the part concerning the Marie Skłodowska-Curie scholarships, which are mainly postdoc scholarships of the European Union, which involve international collaboration, meaning postdocs from different countries coming to Europe or elsewhere and then returning to Europe. And Israel scores relatively low on this parameter. Then you have patents, meaning intellectual property, and here Israel is above average. And then there is a parameter concerning citations of articles published in specific journals. And here you can see again, Israel scores below average. So basically, usually when you think about higher education system, one would expect some consistency within these types of parameters. So if the level of science in the country is good, then probably researchers in this country publish papers that are being cited widely. They would have more intellectual property produced. They would have more international collaborations, and accordingly, they would just secure more funding in competitive funding mechanisms. But here you see this huge abnormality where Israel is basically doing okay on all other parameters, sometimes below average, sometimes above average. But on ERC, it does extremely well. And if we will look into the starter and consolidator grant, it's about the number of years after finishing one's PhD. Starter would be until 8 years, I think, and consolidator between 8 and 12 years after PhD completion. You can see that Israel is doing okay on social sciences, but very well on all others, both for starter and for consolidator grant. So we have this mystery, and what we were thinking to do is to explore this mystery, looking into this arena of higher education from a sociological point of view. I'm a sociologist of education, and I usually use questions concerning inequality, concerning power relations, concerning the hegemony in order to understand and perhaps even to affect, to shape the system in question. So that was our mystery, a little bit of background. Securing funding and especially competitive funding has become a marker of excellence in many education systems. Sometimes it's even more prestigious than publishing articles. You can see that many times promotion procedures, hiring procedures prefer candidates that showed success in getting in securing external funding. This is because, first of all, the fact that direct state support for higher education has diminished, and partly because it was replaced by market-led governance ideology that basically places demands on academics to get their own funding to support their own research. Such governance is been increasingly used to exercise authorities by departments, institutions, funding agencies, etc. Nevertheless, compared to the private sector, education systems in many countries, in most countries, I would say in the global north, are rather isolated, and it's not easy to impose control over what academics do and how they do their research. There are also variations between countries, institutions, and even disciplines within the same institution. As was mentioned in the introduction, I moved from materials engineering to sociology of education, and I was exposed to two totally different cultures of evaluation and promotion and funding. So basically, we see this difference. In terms of how the field is positioned, national academic systems and academics within the systems in their different disciplines operate within the framework that is known to them and they are familiar with. They know which requirements there are out there for admission, for promotion. They understand the rewards. Sometimes they comply with the system and sometimes they might resist the system. We know a little bit about how the governance of the higher education systems occur. We have some studies looking into the neoliberal aspects and precarity of work conditions of academics, but we don't really know a lot about how a system that puts focus, extremely high focus on external funding, how it functions and what can, and how basically different actors within the system respond to the fact that system is funded through external funding scheme. And that was of our interest. And this is because Israel education system has a very unique funding scheme, which I would like to detail at this stage. I will come back to the theoretical framework in a second. I just want to talk a little bit about the Israeli higher education system. It is a binary with high-profile research universities and second-tier academic colleges. It is often performs rather well on international rankings. The funding is provided by the government. Most of the system is public. It's provided by the Council of Higher Education and the Committee for Budgeting and Planning. And the system basically based on several several parameters, research-based and teaching-based. In this talk, I would like to focus on research because we are concerned with funding and external funding. So basically, the budget on a 5-year plan distributed between the universities. Universities compete in a zero-sum game for fixed budget, meaning, for example, if we have 9 universities, in 9 of them we have a Department of Education, Faculty of Education, then until very recently, the system would, the Council of Higher Education would check the publications and the external funding gained by each of the departments, and it will fund each department accordingly to the matching mechanism. So as better a department perform, meaning each of the researchers in the department will get published in high impact factor journals and get extremely competitive external funding, the more money they will get from the government. And there is also a prize where the best 2 departments in each field get extra bonus for their performance from the government, meaning that once the institutions understand this funding formula, they have a very high pressure to work according to the formula, meaning to maximize their production of knowledge, production of academic coins, if we can call them that way, meaning publications and external fundings, in order to get more funding from the budget, from the government. And this system is rather unique and very interesting. It's very unique compared to European countries. Basically, most of the budget is allocated in a zero-sum game between these research-intense universities. Okay, so that's one point that I wanted to make. And another point perhaps that is important for the discussion now is that the salaries are generally fixed by the ranks. There are 4 ranks: lecturer, senior lecturer, associate professor, and full professor. But there are some small increases in the salary that are possible, and they are possible for academics who gain, again, competitive external funding. So there is some incentive for academics to excel. There is no immediate monetary-based parameter for publishing, but there is one for external competitive funding. So if we look into this field of academia with the scope of Bourdieu work on social arenas, we can imagine that the field of higher education in Israel, as well as in other countries, is an arena of struggle, where actors in the field are researchers, departments, institutions. They utilize their capitals, they compete, and they are trying to improve their positions. They develop and sustain their professional identities. And in a system that we assume that values external competitive funding, we assume that this symbolic and economical capital that they gain through external funding may play a very important role in their positioning in the field. And this is basically my background for the study. You have an intriguing fact that Israel scores much better than other countries on European Research Council index. We understand that this comes not from publications, but rather from external competitive funding. We understand that the budgeting scheme relies very highly on this external funding component. And we are trying to analyze the field using sociological lenses. So what we did, we methodologically speaking, we performed almost 50 interviews with various stakeholders in the field, including people from the budgeting committee, winners of ERC grants, system administrators at the university, and academic deans. And we try to understand what incentivizes them and how they position themselves in the field and how they work. So I will provide you some quotations from this work. Okay, so basically, for the sake of our meeting today, I divided this into various types of actors that are active in the field. So the regulators, those people, those actors who basically are responsible for the funding formula for this algorithm that I presented to you, they see their activity as a fair mechanism of funding distribution. They see it as the best way to work, and since it's sort of objective, it has ranks and numbers, it serves as a buffer between political actors like the Ministry of Education and the higher education system that, according to them, should be independent and should work only on merit-based basically standards. So, one quote from a Council of Higher Education Administrators, basically they say that once, a couple of decades ago, the funding formula was secret, but then they published it, and universities over time understood how to benefit from the model. They received the funds to implement the model, and then they basically create incentives for researchers to internalize these criteria. For example, if moving from rank to rank in the promotion procedure, the university will require a researcher to gain external funding, it would be a precondition for promotion, then probably researchers will comply. Regulators were also aware that budgeting formula may create different situations that wouldn't definitely be merit-based. For example, in humanities, if the formula prioritizes funding, then perhaps researchers may invest more time in gaining this funding, in writing applications, when they don't really need the money, just for the sake of their CV, but they believe that that is still the best way to distribute the money. And here another quote, they say the money comes to the university based on performance. We push people hard to submit ERC proposals. So basically this is the university administrator, and they see their role as implementators of the model. So whatever they understand the funding model as a set of instructions that universities should adopt and work according to them. So again, basically we see that the system now moves heavily towards this external funding acquisition because of the funding model. When we look into academic staff members, and again, we interviewed people of different positions, different ranks, those who were successful with external funding and those who not. You can see here an example. I write research proposals constantly. You can see, you can say there is never a time that I don't have at least an idea or a thought about writing a research proposal. And because they basically submit because it costs money to support a team of PhD students, and there is a constant race to have money in my lab. So basically this is a full professor, but he says that, by the way, at previous stages, it was also important for career advancement, meaning that in order to be promoted, external funding is needed. But then he says that he doesn't need to be promoted anymore, but he still submits a lot of grants all the time. However, in the humanities, some of the faculty members tried to resist this funding scheme, and some of them, as you can see here, see it as a necessary evil, that they must comply, but sometimes they won't comply. We found a rather clear difference between attitudes of tenured and untenured faculty members, where more senior faculty members were able to resist more fiercely to this culture of grant submission. You can see some quotes here that I'm not going to read. Some of the senior faculty members considered grants application as responsible academic citizenship, and this is because the department, as I mentioned, gets matched by the money received from external funding. In Israeli universities, I guess as elsewhere, academics are also holding senior positions, senior leadership positions as academic deans or heads of departments. And here we saw again some differences between humanities and social sciences on one hand and natural sciences on the other hand. So the deans, meaning academics holding leadership positions, tried to support emerging scholars in submitting their grants, but they also were rather reluctant to embrace it fully 100% as one way to work. And then ERC is definitely, because of a high value of this grant, but also because of the symbolic status of it, was rather often mentioned as this one symbol of excellence, much more than, for example, publishing a paper in the most prestigious journal, and that's therefore was very much supported by these administrators. For life sciences, we saw that writing a grant was basically part of their job. They didn't see it as something different or something external or something that is being imposed on them. But to hold a lab, they basically felt that they need to apply. And some of them tried to rationalize this as a more challenging, more inspiring task than writing an article. Say, here you can see another quote. This is the last quote that I will show you. To write a grant is not to write an article, it's something else. Writing an article can help you to improve it, probably through revision process, but to write a grant, you have to write with a vision. It's a lot of fun writing a grant because you're basically planning all the things that you want to do. So they actually found advantages in the system. To conclude, we saw that, so the mystery, right? We need the solution to the mystery. Probably we can say that the academic field in Israel is shaped by various actors that try to accumulate their capital in this international field. They try to position themselves. And if we are trying to understand the field with the lenses of Bourdieu, we would say that there is a shift from publications to external grants because of the formula that is valid and it's open, it's known to the institutions, and they are urged to act accordingly, following a neoliberal agenda. So we can see kind of a chain reaction from the regulator with the budgeting algorithm that encourages the university administrator to promote staff members of this symbolic capital. And then grantsmanship basically is a cultural capital which is attributed to the high prestige of this external competitive funding. And we can see that in various academic disciplines, there are different norms, and the level of resistance is different. In humanities is much higher than in in life and hard sciences. However, all disciplines around all universities in Israel eventually comply according to this norm and encourage rather fiercely to academic staff members to submit these grants. And probably that's what leads eventually to the success, to this exceptional success of Israel in submitting, but also in receiving these ERC grants. We can, however, discuss also the disadvantages of this approach. For example, if academic knowledge is being produced through publications and Israeli academics are not encouraged to publish, or less encouraged to publish than to submit grant applications, then it might create a problem in the long run. We invest, since the success rates in these grants and in all grants is rather low, basically we use our academic energy, our curiosity, our time to work on grant submissions while they are not perhaps useful or not read by anyone, and eventually are not implemented, since the chances to actually secure funding are rather low. I think that was all from my side, and I'm ready to open the floor for questions.
Thank you very much, Miri. That's an exciting topic, given that the government of Israel tries to encourage faculty members to get more money from abroad by giving these scholars an equivalent of what they get abroad, right? So that was, I guess it's pretty much unique. I don't know if any other government actually does this with regard to how you pursue the research money abroad. So from that point of view, I was curious. I invite colleagues to write questions or raise your hands so that you can, but maybe I can use opportunity to ask about the accounting system, because if they get money from abroad, I suppose they also have to account for the money to these external agencies, right? So how do these accounting systems or reporting systems that the faculty members have to manage at the same time? Are they equivalents, or like how do they manage these differences in accounting and reporting?
Right. So I'm not sure that I got your question to 100%.
Sorry, I make
No,
assumption that these will be different accounting and reporting systems, but maybe they are not.
No, they're not that different. And again, just like the faculties got used to support grant submissions, they got used to support grant management and accounting. So in terms of grant submissions, in most research-intensive universities, there are systems of support. For example, they would, I don't know, bring on an external consultant to support interview preparations. They would hold mock interviews to prepare scholars for interviews. They would give advice on even, I don't know, makeup or lighting, whatever. The same with accounting. They basically comply with the requirements of various funding agencies and provide the support. I can see here a question in the chat. So why they focus on money rather than on journal articles? It's a good question, but that's again what is, I think, is not, it is exceptional in the system. First of all, there is an assumption that okay, so I will answer the question from the point of view of the regulator, from the point of view of Council of Higher Education. I'm not working there, but I can assume, and from the interviews that we learned. So they want the system to be the most competitive, the most innovative, and best performing system. There is also a belief that academia is not the most efficient system in the world, and that basically we are spending taxpayers' money on doing different things. Some of them might be important and some of them not. And the statement is that external money, or when someone else will evaluate our work, it would be a better evaluation than we ourselves will evaluate our work. And the belief is that external funding is more competitive than publishing an article. Therefore, it will lead to the system's excellence. If you ask me if it's true, I don't think so. I think that the system that encourage you to submit many grants that eventually are not successful, because that's how it is. There are 10% or even 20% success rate. It's not that high. You basically waste most of your energy on doing this instead of doing research that can actually contribute to the society. And within the system of ranking and, you know, deciding what is competitive, what is not competitive, what is being matched, what is not being matched, there are many absurds. For example, when we look into, you know, they fund publications based on the impact factor, okay? So those who are rated highly, these departments will get more money. But let's assume that you are a scholar of history of education, okay? So the best journal in the field of history of education would have a very low impact factor, meaning that sometimes, or if you study technology in education, even not the best journal in the field will get a very high impact factor because of the hype over technology after COVID times, because there are more, a larger community of researchers that, you know, cite each other work. Then basically we are not encouraging best quality, we're encouraging certain fields that are skewed towards different types of agenda and different types of regimes, which basically harms badly the education system.
Thank you for your answer. Just on the particular points of the fields, it's possible to adjust according to the size of the field. So there used to be something called eigenvalue, which would take the citations and adjust according to how large your field is. So there are mathematical ways of dealing with that. But thank you for your answer.
Yeah, no, that's true. They're trying to account for the type of the field, and they also, for example, introduced some kind of form of budgeting for academic books that are not, they don't have the impact factor. But again, you know, it's like a race, and every time since this system is huge, and the funding machine is very complex, it takes time, it takes years for the institutions to understand, to embed the system of incentives, and then it changes. So basically, it's not in an ideal place now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, colleagues, welcome just for other questions or comments. So your experiences probably, or thinking about what this competition for grants mean in your case is probably. I can see.
I'm trying to read here the comment
okay.
in
Yeah,
chat.
so,
It takes me some time. So
maybe we read for the others as well, because they kind of, when they watch video, they can probably want
right.
to.
So Katie is saying, you mentioned that the system recognizes that the scholars are sometimes submitting the grant proposal for the projects for which they don't need money. And I've seen the cases that proposals are being modified, but still replicated for grant applications. Yes, although the system still sees this approach efficient, have you seen any proposals during the interviews about the possible alternative ways for focusing on more meaningful and new projects? So, you know, first of all, there is a rather diverse population of academics. Some of them would do exactly what the head of department would tell them to do, and they will basically comply with all the demands and will focus on submitting grants and, you know, doing all this stuff that we discussed. Some of them would resist. Some of them would say, we can, you know, write an article and then use the results or the introduction sections of the article to write a proposal. So I think that in terms of the day-to-day academic, you know, finding a meaning in what you do, most of the scholars that we spoke with, they felt that they do meaningful work. They felt that they are contributing to the society. Nevertheless, all of them weren't happy about the way they are being treated by this mechanism of funding and of incentivizing them. Most of them said that they would do much better without the need to submit grant every year if, for example, you want to submit once in 3 years, or they wouldn't specifically write a proposal at, you know, this specific time on this specific topic. Again, ERC is a bottom-up approach, meaning researchers are bringing their own topics. But many of these funding schemes, they are based on the demands from funding organizations. So, for example, if there is a money in, I don't know, researching Alzheimer's disease, people would do a lot of research because there is money there, but they wouldn't do research on cancer or whatever. So it's always, you know, what, depending on how much time you have and what kind of funding is available. So it was not easy to do meaningful and new projects within the constraints of the field.
Right, thank you. I was curious actually about the sustainability of the work you just mentioned in your comment about commitments to a particular development, a particular area of research. But in general, in terms of academic habitus, because it's kind of part of the talk emphasizes this, is like developing this academic environment or developing an academic profession as such and creating sustainability. Do you feel that professors or researchers develop this kind of long-term commitment as a result of the system of funding as it is, or do you think it's some problematic type of development which might kind of, I don't know, let us say, stimulate brain drain or something else?
No, I think there is rather almost perfect embedment of the norms, especially because of the fact that the system is extreme, right? It's unique, very unique in terms of the funding, but the principles of the system are rather similar to what's going on in other countries. So perhaps you know you won't be funded and matched in the same way, but in many European countries, you would still be pushed towards submitting more grants and getting external money. It might not affect the department funding in the same way as it is in Israel, and it's an extreme. And we can see that the ERC grants are, I think, scheme is 20 years old. So it's rather sustainable as well as the academic practices within the academic habitus in Israel. And because it's not isolated from the world, it's just extreme, it doesn't cause brain drain. It just causes more prominent adoption of these norms.
Okay, thank you.
So we have a question here. Matthew effect.
So yeah,
there is a Matthew effect. You can see you can see it in all kind of quantitative studies looking into success rate in getting funded. It is there. We know that people get more prizes after getting one prize and more publications after getting one publication, as well as external funding. We haven't looked into this. What we saw in a different study, but on the same topic, we looked into people who decided to resist the norm. So often these were professors that complied with the system at the beginning, and after they were tenured, they basically opt off the system totally. So they kept their position, but they basically did whatever they want. And there, obviously, it was the opposite of Matthew effect. So once they decided that they're not complying with the norm, they had less grants, less publications, and basically they created their own mini habitus, if you want to work with. It wasn't a very successful strategy. They were isolated, and I don't, from our evidence, they didn't feel that they basically win the system. The system just controls them even when they resist to this norm. So it's again, I don't think that you can win in this situation. When you comply, you basically waste your time on non-research related tasks. You try to maximize grant acquisition, and when you resist, again, you are left out and lose the advantages that you can get, but still you can not utilize your research agenda in the best way possible.